My friend James was about to make a $40,000 mistake. He was dead set on using the first home buyer grants to buy his first property, until I showed him how he could build a $2 million property portfolio in half the time without the grant. The banks don't want you to know this, but first home buyer grants could be killing your wealth building potential. Today I'm showing you exactly what smart investors do instead. Hey everyone, Aagam Jain here. I help busy professionals build property portfolios that create real wealth. If you're thinking about using a first home buyer grant to kickstart your property journey, I need you to watch this entire video first. It might save you hundreds of thousands of dollars. Most people think these grants are free money, but what if I told you they could be actually stopping you from building serious wealth? Let me explain. First, let's break down what these grants actually give you. You can actually pay no stamp duty. Another benefit is there are some schemes that allow you to just get in with a 5% deposit, but the government covers that LMI. And in some states, you get a cash grant to buy the property. Sounds awesome, right? But here's what most people miss. Problem number one, you're forced to live in the property. The government isn't just giving you free money. You need to live in that property for 6 to 12 months. So think about it. You're buying a property that has to be your home, can't be an investment straight away or in 1 month, limits where you can live, and number three, locks up your borrowing capacity as well in certain circumstances. Here's problem number two. Depending on which state you're in, you can be capped on the property value. In most states, these grants only work for a range between $600 to as high as $900. Now, imagine you're living in Sydney. What property can you buy at $900,000? Very little options. You're basically forced to buy a unit or apartments or townhouses, or you'd have to be buying a property in less desirable areas, which could mean these properties come with limited growth potential. And also, your growth potential is purely linked to that one asset. Problem number three is you're wasting your first buyer status. This is a big one. You only get to be a first home buyer once. Using this status on an average property instead of part of a strategic plan is like using your get out of jail free card to skip paying $5 in Monopoly. But what if there was a better way? Instead of rushing to use your first home buyer grant, here's what successful investors do. Strategy number one is start with the investment property first. For example, let's say you have a $50,000 deposit. You could A, buy a $500K property with a first home buyer's grant and live in it. Option B, buy a $600K investment property in a high growth area, and it doesn't even have to be in your backyard. With option B, number one, the tenants help you pay your mortgage because you're receiving rental income. Number two, you get tax benefits from negative gearing because you can claim all the expenses involved. And number three, you can still rent where you want to live, or even better yet, live with your parents, continue living there, rent free, or at minimal rent. And lastly, you're building equity in a property with a better growth potential because you're not bound to where you're living. You can be buying the property interstate or several thousand kilometers away from you in the same state. Let me show you a real example. My client Sarah, she had $60,000 saved. Instead of buying a $600K apartment with her first homeowner's grant, she bought a $650,000 house in a growth suburb as an investment. Fast forward 2 years later, that property grew to $780,000. She used that equity to buy her second property while still renting where she wanted to live. And this is what people don't know, is that when the banks look at your borrowing capacity for an investment property, it's much higher than your owner-occupier property because they're taking into account negative gearing benefits, the rental income that you're also receiving, and all of this helps increase the borrowing capacity and the total purchasing capacity as well. Now, here's a way that you can actually use these first home buyer grants as an investor to still build your portfolio. If you have a certain amount of savings, for example, you had 100K, well, you could buy a property where you could live in, and it may need a little bit of work, and you've got a lot of money saved up, and you may only need to put 5% deposit. So if you had a 500K property, you may only need to put 25,000 of that 100K that you have saved up. Now, that remaining 75, you could use a portion of it to sort of fix up the property or do some significant renovations, which then allows that property to increase in value. Then you can go back to the bank, refinance it back to 80% or 90%, and therefore show it as an investment property. Now, what that's done is that's allowed you to enter that property with a minimal deposit and therefore end up with an investment grade asset, which you can now keep as an investment property and move back in with parents or move back into a rental. You've got to make sure you check with your solicitor that you're not liable to pay any additional stamp duty or any other costs, but you do satisfy the conditions of making it an investment property while entering it as an owner-occupier property. However, the cool thing is you can do this without the government scheme as well. You can buy a property with good renovation upside as an investment, renovate strategically to add, 15-20% in value. Then we can go back to the bank, get 3 or 4 different valuations, and refinance up to 88% on the new value. And you may find that you have your renovation costs retrieved plus more, allowing you to buy the next property. And that lastly, it is super important if you do follow this, is that you use the right lenders. Not all banks value properties the same way. I've seen differences of over 300k on the same property by different banks. Simply different banks. One bank valued at $1 million, one bank valued at $1.3 million. By using the right lenders in the right order, you can not only maximize your borrowing capacity, but you can maximize your equity capacity and getting the maximum amount of equity, which could help you fund another 1 or even 2 properties sometimes. Let me show you how this works in practice. But before I show you exactly how to implement this strategy step by step, if you're serious about building a property portfolio that creates real wealth, I've put together a free property investor strategy session. In this call, we'll analyze your current financial position, map out your borrowing capacity across different lenders, and create a customized property investment roadmap. Just click the link in the description below and book a time that works for you. Now, let's get back to the strategy. So, how do you actually put this into practice? Let me break it down. Step 1, focus on buying the best possible asset that you can with the borrowing capacity that you have, rather than focusing on the first homeowner grants available to you. The first thing I do when I get these kind of scenarios with clients is I find out what is their maximum borrowing capacity. Most people look at one bank, or they go to one bank, their local branch down the road. Big mistake. Don't do that. Use a broker, because different banks calculate your borrowing capacity differently. And some banks have products where you can get in with as little as a 5 to 6% deposit with an investment property, instead of having the traditional 20% or even the traditional 12% deposit. Some include 100% of the rental income, some only include 80%. Some treat bonus and commission income differently. Some banks have much better policies for self-employed people who are business owners and have different ways of showing income, or different entities which they're drawing income from. By matching you with the right lender, sometimes unlock an extra $1 million in borrowing capacity. Step 2, use the right professionals. Sometimes you may need to use someone who's better at you at finding the properties that you need to buy. That can come as a buyer's agent, or maybe a family friend, or someone who actually has a portfolio themselves, who can guide you and can help you understand which areas are more likely to have better growth, and what kind of assets, what kind of due diligence do you need, what kind of things to look out for in these properties. These factors will create much more wealth than a one-time stamp duty saving. Number 3 is using these equity acceleration techniques. This is what separates amateur investors from professionals. Once you've bought your first investment property, wait 6 to 12 months for that initial growth. But as little as 6 months from what we've seen, you could get a significant uplift in your valuation. What we've seen with our clients is within 6 months, sometimes we do valuations with several banks and they have significant equity available, which they can either club with their savings or just use on its own to buy the next investment property. And most people don't know that you can actually borrow up to 88%, pay a little bit of LMI, to borrow more equity against the same property rather than the standard 80%. And step 4, if you want to use the first home buyer benefit strategically and you're okay to go live in the area where there are investment grade assets, then make that move. Take full advantage of it. Enter with a low deposit. Use some of the remaining savings, or build up savings where you can improve the house and build it into something that has increased in value by 10 to 15% by natural market movement, as well as your contribution combined. And this can mean that you end up with a much better asset at the end, as well as you can make it an investment and move back into a rental and keep growing your portfolio. Let me walk you through a real example. Remember, this is James, the friend I mentioned at the start of this video. 2 years ago, he had 70 grand saved and was about to use this on a first home buyer grant on a $650K apartment. Instead, we did this. We bought a $620,000 investment property. We used a lender who was allowing us to use a 12% deposit, which means he only needed around 74 grand deposit. After 1 year, the property was valued at $720,000. We refinanced and pulled out around 80 grand in equity, which was then used to buy his second investment property. Now, today, James has 2 investment properties worth $1.4 million, equity of over 300K, rental income that helps him cover a significant amount of his mortgage costs, and he's now on track to buy his 3rd investment property already. All which, if he was to buy his first property to live in, may not have been possible so quickly. So there you have it. This is why smart investors aren't attached to the first home buyer grants and instead attached to building a property portfolio. To recap, start with investment properties with high growth areas. Number 2, use the right lenders to maximize borrowing capacity as well as get the most amount of equity. And number 3, use your savings to accelerate the equity by doing renovations or adding things to the property. And number 4, if you can, use the first home grants to buy in areas which are high growth and have the good fundamentals attached to them, then use the remaining savings to boost the equity in that property so you can make it an investment much quicker. If you're serious about building wealth through property, don't just watch this video and do nothing. Book a free property investor strategy session with me where we'll analyze your current financial position, map out your borrowing capacity, and create a customized property roadmap just for you. The link is in the description below. Also, if you found this valuable, hit that like button, subscribe, and leave a comment letting me know what other property investing topics you'd like me to cover. This is Aagam Jain, and I'll see you in the next video.